everybody. Welcome to the Business Bridge to Breakthrough. This is a show where real business owners share their toughest challenges and the game-changing breakthroughs that got them to the next level. I'm Debbie Z. Lattuga, business coach and profit strategist, and I ask the questions that no one else does. And you'll hear the raw, unfiltered stories of struggle and success and everything in between. If you're tired of business podcasts that put you to sleep, then you're in the right place. No fluff, no theory, just real talk and real results. So we're going to get into it today. And today I am super excited to be talking with a great friend and mentor, Ryan Levesque. Many of you know them as the author of Choose and Ask, great business books. Highly recommend them if you've not read them already. I do know secretly that there are some other books in the works. So I'm really excited. Ryan, thank you so much. Welcome to the show. So happy to have you here.
Debbie, I've been looking forward to this conversation and excited to be here as well.
Yeah, so let's give the CNN version. I'm sure many people are familiar with your work. You've been kind of in the internet world for about 10 years already, maybe 15, and certainly you've had some highs and lows, and you've made quite a few pivots in your business along the way. Well, why don't we start back with what inspired you to kind of go down this internet marketing road, and then we'll kind of get into where you are now.
Gosh, yeah. So many great questions in that. What inspired me to get into this internet marketing world, when I was a kid, it's funny. I actually remember where I was when I made this decision. I said, I either want to be one of two things when I grow up. I either want to be a doctor or I want to be a millionaire. And I had no idea what like being a millionaire actually meant, but like it was like, all right, I want to be a doctor or a millionaire. And I fondly remember being in the car driving with my parents. I know exactly where it was where I had this realization, probably as like a 10-year-old kid. In college, I was attending on pursuing medicine. So I studied neuroscience and Asian studies in college, and knew that at that time that I probably didn't want to go into medicine, but I didn't know what I wanted to do. So I had an opportunity to work in finance, and it was really just a great way to make good money in an area that I had some interest and passion in. So after college, I worked on Wall Street for a few years, and then I had an opportunity to move to China to live and work in China. And it was in China where I kind of had this quarter life crisis, Debbie. I was in my mid 20s and I had achieved like everything I thought I wanted to achieve professionally. I had this great job, great career. I was able to, I studied Chinese in college. I was able to use my Mandarin, my language, and I felt empty. I felt like, wait, this was it? It felt like there was this fire, this flame inside of me that was almost extinguished, but it was just there. It's like if you've ever done a campfire before and there's just those last few embers, and if you like kind of reignite those embers, the flame will just pick up. But it was almost gone. And I didn't know what business I wanted to start. I just knew in my heart that I wanted to create something. I wanted to build something. And at the time, this was in around 2006, 2007, the internet as we know it today was starting to emerge. So this wasn't the earliest days of the internet, but it was the early days of Google AdWords. This was pre-Meta advertising. Meta advertising, Facebook advertising didn't exist at the time. And I started investing in education in all these different online programs. And the way I rationalized it to myself was I was thinking about maybe going to business school. And I thought if I go to business school, I'm going to spend a couple $100,000. And who knows what I'm actually going to learn. Or I could invest a tiny fraction of that, 1/10 that, and invest in the school of hard knocks, so to speak. And I'm going to learn more about starting a business, even if that business fails, from actually taking action. So I decided to pursue that path. And I realized that in the world of online marketing, there are a lot of scammers and fraudsters and people that you can't trust and believe in. And I bought a lot of programs that I can't believe I spent the money that I spent on them. But eventually, I came across a person that I would say was the first person I really believed in what he was teaching. Like I believed that what he was teaching, he had actually done, and that he was someone who was operating in integrity. And that person was Dr. Glenn Livingston, who really went on to become my first most important mentor. And I learned his methodology, and he had built a business going into a number of different little niche markets using a market research approach that he had sort of stumbled on and developed. And I made a decision that I wanted to be his number one student, his best student. And so I built a business. My first real successful business was in the orchid care space. And it was a business teaching people how to care for their orchids. And we wrote a book, we created a DVD course, we created a number of online programs, we built a membership site called the Green Thumb Club. We started selling orchid supplies, we started selling orchid jewelry, we started really building a very nice business in a totally random niche market. And it allowed me to, number one, go to work for myself, leave my career, leave my job. It allowed my wife, who's working at the time we started the business, to leave her job and start working with me full time, and really was kind of like that initial catalyst that got our business off the ground.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that as an orchid grower, right? One of my first forays was um, bought some training and learned a little bit about how to rank on Google. So I picked a niche that was trending and just started writing articles every day. I'd do the research on Google about the article because I didn't know anything about it. And it only took me like 3 months to wind up on the first page of Google. And then I started getting featured by like bigger people in the industry, right? And it was growing. So definitely had that urge to kind of understand this new medium and how that works. So I don't know if you can like fast forward to today.
Yeah,
I can do a quick synopsis. So from my perspective, so you found success in one business.
yeah,
You then took what you learned in one business, and then you started to apply it to some different niches. Some of
yep,
them worked, some of them didn't. And I think
yep,
some of the evidence of that comes in your early books, right? Both Choose and Ask.
yep.
Here's what I found. Here's how to find niches. Here's how you move through. Here's how you build a successful business. And now you've scaled it into kind of a massive online opportunity to help entrepreneurs kind of take that journey, but with the benefit of all the successes and failures along the way.
Mm.
That's how I would describe it. Bring us to today and where your business is today.
Yeah, so a long and winding road, right? So 2006, 2007 to where we are here today, gosh, 17, 18 years later, was, a lot of twists and turns, a lot of mistakes. As you pointed out, I started one little business, and then my idea at the time was, well, I can go into 20 different niche markets. And if I have 20 different businesses that are making about $500,000 a year, which is what my orchid business was making at that time, then I surmised that I could build basically a $10 million empire, and I would be diversified across different markets, so I'd have some resiliency if, one market fell apart or what have you. I quickly realized that that was a terrible idea because you can't easily cross-sell products and services from one unrelated business to the next. So that served for a while. Along the way, I started running into other entrepreneurs who were interested in doing what I was doing, but they wanted to maybe hire someone. So I started partnering with other businesses to implement what I was implementing. It didn't have a name at the time, but I was using these surveys and these quiz funnels and different ways to generate leads and understand my market. And so I started partnering with big businesses who brought me in on a revenue share basis to help implement what it is that what I was doing. And then at that time, I was running around working really hard, really long hours. My first son was born around that time. And long story short, I worked so hard it put me in the hospital. And I realized that I had an immune response, an autoimmune response in my body that led me to basically for my pancreas to fail and my renal system, my organs to effectively shut down. And I became as an adult, in my 30s, a type 1 juvenile diabetic, which is not, I'm not the only person in history that that's happened to, but it's pretty rare. Most people become a juvenile diabetic when they're a child, not when they're an adult, and it is an autoimmune response. So that happened, and that was like a wake-up call, and like, okay, I can't keep going on the path that I'm going on. I've got all these businesses, all these clients. I'm going in a million different directions. So what I decided to do instead is I said, okay, I've got to simplify my life and my business, and I decided to teach what it is that I was doing. I wrote a book, Ask. This is in 2014, and the book became #1 best-selling book in the country across all categories. And that was sort of the seed to build a training and education business that I built for about 10 years called the Ask Method Company. From there, we developed this methodology, the Ask Method, which, as you know, is methodology for better understanding your market and your audience and launching and growing a business online. And then from there, built a software technology company that was the technology for implementing that methodology that was called Bucket. Fast forward to here today, and last year we actually sold our software company, interestingly, to what some might consider to be our #1 competitor, which is a topic for conversation, and made the decision to really scale back the sort of the training and education company that we built when I was in what I call empire building season of life. And where I'm right now, that child that I mentioned when I found out that I was a type 1 diabetic is now 13 years old, and I feel the clock ticking in a big way that I've only got a few more years with my kiddos at home before, they go off to college and go off into the real world. So what I'm really optimizing for right now in this season of life is a very lean business that allows me to earn a good earning. But I'm not in this season of life where I'm trying to build this empire that I'm looking to scale and sell and build a big team. And so it's been this interesting, I guess, experience of growth from solopreneur to big company of almost 100 team members, if you can believe it, is what we got to at our peak, between the software company and then the training company, between the coaches and software developers and customer service team and marketing team and operations team and everything. So it got really, really big, and now we're much smaller. And on the personal side, we moved from the Austin, Texas area about 2.5, 3 years ago to Vermont, where we live on and operate a small scale family farm where we raise and grow most of the food that we eat up here in the mountains of Vermont. So that brings us fast forward style in, I guess, 17, 18 years in just a few minutes.
Yeah. And I love that, right? And I can see that trajectory. The premise of this podcast is about um breakthroughs, right?
Mm,
People come up against challenges, and your story alone
mm,
just seems to be, yes, there's successes, but they were mostly predicated on, thought I was going to diversify, found out that that wasn't quite the pathway. So that's a roadblock, and you had to navigate that. And then you said, well, maybe I can partner, right? That challenge then laid you to say, okay, how do I be more efficient? Well, at the time, people were asking you for help, and you're like, well, maybe I could help them. And
mm.
then that became unsustainable. So it seems like you've built your business on obstacle, 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 obstacle.
Mm.
And I think most business owners think that business is success to slight problem to success to slight problem. And the way you tell it, it's actually the opposite. So, so what's a nugget that you could share with our listeners about the fact that these obstacles keep showing up and you
Mm.
keep having to navigate them? How do you do that? Like, would you have any recommendations for how to either, I don't know, like, I don't even know, like, you seem to do it sequentially. Like,
I have a
and
few thoughts.
how do you do that?
I have a few thoughts. One thought starts with a question. Going up one level, I've always been a student of questions, and I believe when you change your questions, you can change your life. And one of my life mantras, as you've heard me say many times, is ask questions, be curious, seek truth. And I believe questions are really at the heart of everything that it is that we do. So there's a question that I want to invite anyone, if you're watching or listening to this right now, to be thinking about, and it's this: what are you optimizing for right now? And every decision that you make, every move that you make should be built around that one thing. So for me, I'm very, very clear what I'm optimizing for right now in my life. What I'm optimizing for is that brief window of time what I have with my two boys here on the farm before I know that these days are going to be behind us. And so
Right.
I'm trying to maximize, to suck the marrow out of this season of life, to paraphrase Thoreau. That's what I'm optimizing for right now. And I'm very clear on that. When I started my first business back in 2007, what I was optimizing for was to build a location independent business that made me $10,000 a month. I was very clear on that. I had uh, been in this job where I was living out of hotels and traveling all the time, and I was exhausted. I was tired of having to be on the road and doing that type of work. And I said, you know what? I just want a business where I can work from home. I can make like $10,000 a month, and that's what I optimize for. And went from 10,000 a month to 100,000 a month to $1 million a month and beyond. And at each level, you have a question that you're running into. So I think that's the first thing is what are you optimizing for? I think a big mistake that a lot of people make is they see someone quote unquote successful online and they try to replicate the strategies that they're putting in place. But what they don't realize are the constraints or the trade-offs that they're making in order to get there. Like, for example, they might diminish something. They might say, oh, this person, I know this person doesn't have any kids, but still they're able to do this. What's like, do you realize like everything that they're doing? I don't want to name any specific names, but there is like an influencer that I know, a friend of mine actually, and this person travels everywhere this person goes, travels with a full camera crew everywhere. Like I'm saying, not just like, sometimes everywhere. Literally, they're living their life like a reality TV star. When they go to eat at a restaurant, they're getting an extra meal for the camera crew that's sitting in the restaurant with them and their family. When they get their haircut, they've got a camera crew in the barbershop documenting that experience everywhere they go. Now, that to me feels like hell on earth for me personally. So, like knowing that, but that's not in the front stage. That's backstage. So if you don't know this person personally, you're not going to know that this is a reality. That's a trade-off. Most people don't know that that's the trade-off that they're making. I know somebody else who's decided not to have children until maybe much later in life because they're just 100% fixated on building their business right here, right now. Now, for that person, that might be fine. To the person who doesn't know that that's a truth behind the scenes, they don't realize that the decisions that that person is making and what that person is optimizing for may be in conflict with what you are optimizing for based on what it is that's in your life. So I think that's like step number one is get incredibly clear on the answer to that question. What are you optimizing for? The more specific and the more concrete it can be, the better the decisions you'll make that will help lead you to that goal. Number
Right.
two, I treat everything as an experimenter. Everything is an experiment. If you detach yourself from the outcome and focus on the process and you pretend that you're just a scientist and you have a theory, you've got a hypothesis, you've got a thesis that you want to either prove or disprove, and you put your idea into the marketplace and you become sort of dispassionate over whether your idea is a workable idea or a non-workable idea. I think people get wrapped up in ego in a big way, where they get wrapped up in, and I don't mean that like they're egotistical. I mean, they get wrapped up in being wrong about something. Like that's like the worst thing that could ever happen. Like they feel shame around being wrong. Um, you know, I just told this to my son last night. He was asking me about advice in business, and I said, look, when you're young, you can be wrong 100 times. You only have to be right once. You only have to be right in a big way once. I remember reading something that Mark Cuban wrote years and years ago, and he said, like, take a bunch of swings of the bat because you only need to hit it big once. And that was the secret to how he sold broadcast.com and how he built his billion
Yeah.
dollar, net worth. He was right once. There's a lot of luck that's involved too. And I've like as I've gotten older and older, I try to recognize objectively luck as a factor both in success and failure. So when you're successful in something, recognize that luck has played a role. But when you fail at something, also recognize that luck has played a role.
Right.
And it's not just you as a failure, as a human being or a business person or a marketer or a salesperson. There's a certain level of luck that's
Yeah.
involved. The businesses that I started, I mentioned the orchid business did really well. I had another business that I thought was going to be my next big winner in the memory improvement space, a brand that I created called Rocket Memory, which was a system of memory techniques, and built an entire, set of courses and a platform. And that business was middling at best. I had more skill as a marketer, more experience, more resources. It just, aesthetically was more beautiful. It was the books were better written, just all the things. And yet commercially, it wasn't the level of success that I thought I was going to have with that business.
Right.
Uh, those are a few things that come to mind, Debbie, when it comes to how to deal with adversity, a
Yeah.
perspective to have, and then a frame to be entering into every decision.
Yeah. I love the experiment thing. And I don't know if age has the benefit of, right? Everything is just a test. So if you're a marketer and you're like, well, I'm going to run some ads and they don't work, well, you learned something. You learned that that combination of information was not the information that worked. No judgment. I have a phrase that I like to use with a lot of my friends, which is no shame, no blame. Like
Mhm.
whatever you just I did something, it didn't work. You could own that as a personal assessment, or you could just say, wow, that just didn't work out the way I thought. I thought I had kind of, forecasted enough to do that. And I think that's a difficult thing for business owners. Many business owners, part of their luck, part of their success is luck. And part of a lack of success, my husband and I bought a business right before the market crashed in the first one in 2007, in the construction field. We had run many successful businesses. We understood marketing. We knew how to do that, but we picked an industry that was going to collapse in the next two
Right.
years. So we lost that business. Good thing is I turned around and got hired as CEO to and paid on profit because I had the skill, but that was just dumb luck, right?
Mhm.
And so we could have taken that in and gone, oh, well, we lost the business. Well,
Right.
we made a decision, we gambled at the wrong time, and it didn't work out. But we ran, successful businesses from then. That was just a blip. So I know we're going to wind up here second, but I know you're really doing some really exciting things on LinkedIn and on some different platforms. And I'd love for you to just kind of give us a quick glimpse about what you're kind of seeing and talking about now.
Yeah, it's fascinating to project into the future where things are headed. And I've always been a student of patterns and cycles. And I believe as you think about the most important and valuable meta skills to develop in life, one of those skills I believe is that's among the top skills to learn is pattern recognition, being able to recognize patterns, being able to recognize cycles. Now, in order to do that, I think there's certain things that we can do to stack the deck in our favor. We can become students of history. History doesn't repeat itself, but it does rhyme. Mark Twain said that very famously, and I believe that that's to be true. So, what we're experiencing right now in the world, like with, for example, the advent of artificial intelligence and increasing automation and the algorithm that sort of dominates our daily existence online, these technological forces, even though they're relatively new today, there's a version of that that's repeated itself over and over again historically. So if we go back to the Industrial Revolution, when we started experiencing, factory life for the very first time, there was a counter-revolutionary movement known as the Romantic movement, which was a movement in response to that. I quoted Thoreau at the beginning of our conversation, and Thoreau very famously wrote Walden, where he decided to live out in the woods for 2 years and document that life as a response away from urbanization and basically a return to the natural world. That's a cycle that's repeated itself. And if you look at every generation, there's been a version of that since at least the Industrial Revolution. And some would argue that this dates back to ancient Greece when we started seeing the first city-states that were taking place. So it tells me that there's something in our human nature that's timeless, that's not specific to this time in history, that there is a constant, what I call return to real, that there's this desire that as we see technological influence invade our life more and more and more, and as more of our life is consumed through a screen, We have this yearning, this feeling of wanting to get back to what it is that's real. We don't want to just eat foods that are in a box that are prepackaged. We want foods that are truly real foods. We don't want relationships that are through social media, through chat messages and DMs, but we want real relationships with real human beings that we meet with in person, that, we can actually shake their hand and be in the presence of another living being. And so I say that because we're entering into one of the fastest changing environments, technically speaking, that certainly any of us have lived through, probably arguably in the history of humanity. And what this presents is, I believe, a business opportunity. And the business opportunity is what I'm describing right now is a craving that is taking place at a global level. That people are feeling this. Collectively, we're feeling that we're being pulled increasingly to spend a life live through abstraction and proxy via a screen. And instead, what we want is more of that real. Now, when people are wanting this, there's an opportunity to provide this. And what becomes rare becomes valuable. So I've said this, and I know you know this expression. I've said, look, when it comes to something as simple as your marketing, yes, you can use ChatGPT, or you can use Claude, or you can use Google Notebook, or you can use Grok, or any of the nascent tools that are emerging here today to write your content and interact with your audience. Or you can make a contrarian decision that I've made, for example, to write that content yourself, to write that message yourself, to not use AI as a zig when they zag move, to demonstrate your realness, your authenticity in the market, to create a connection in a sea of regurgitated AI pablum, to be that beacon, that light of something different that people resonate with in a deep way. And that connection that takes place is a connection that can transcend any product that you might sell. Because at the end of the day, what's more important, I believe, the world that we're living in right now today, it's less about the message and it's more about the messenger. It's, do I trust this person? Is this person on the other side of this communication? Is this someone that I want to do business with? Is this someone I believe in? Is this someone that I trust? And once that trust has been established, then the secondary decision around, okay, what is she selling?
Yeah.
Okay, maybe I'll have a look at that. So I believe that this is an opportunity. And what's great about this is I believe it's an opportunity that's open to all of us. You don't have to
Right.
have a big budget, big infrastructure, big team, or a ton of resources. You just have to have a willingness to be transparent, to be vulnerable, and to lean into your realness and ultimately what that truth is for you.
Yeah. Yeah, I think we do. We talked about this a little bit before we started recording. People are craving that connection. I've seen some marketers talk about that this is the age of the de-influencers. We all know influencers, many of them paid to get followers or paid to promote products or paid to whatever. And that's not authentic. Or they're curating, they're putting filters on their images, they're curating their backgrounds, they're editing their backgrounds, and they're projecting a lifestyle that isn't real, right? That isn't actually authentic to them. And I love what Brene Brown talks about. We admire a vulnerability in other people. When people have the ability to stand up and say, I tried this and I failed. And here's what I
Mm,
learned.
mm,
And yet we hate it in ourselves. We hate that fear. And of course, that goes back to the reptilian brain, right? Where we need to be connection with our community. We don't want to be ostracized from a community. So the fear of vulnerability is people won't like us and we'll get kicked out of the community. Well, that's not necessarily real. I think the internet is the great equalizer. I think in years before the internet, you say something vulnerable to your group of friends, and there is a chance you get kicked out of that group of friends. But now the internet allows those people that go, oh my gosh, I had the same problem. Oh my gosh, that happened to me. I can't believe you have the courage to say that out loud. That's
mm,
so brave. So I
mm.
do think that people want to build relationships with real people. And now we go back like a generation, and Zig Ziglar says, you help enough people get what you want, they want, and you get what you want. And I think it's the realization that all of that automation didn't really extend our relationships that much, right? So
Mm.
there was a gap with all the automation that's happening, and how do we get back to, doing that connection? This has been a lovely conversation. I think we could probably chat all day, but let me ask you, if someone is looking to find you, I know you're everywhere, but where do you want people to come find you online?
That's a great question. Thank you, Debbie. I think the simplest answer is every single week, I write a weekly email newsletter, personally by hand, no AI, no team of writers, with wisdom gained, mistakes made, damning admissions when I've done things wrong. And it's something that I believe is both incredibly insightful for those looking for strategic insights, especially for those entrepreneurs who tend to think differently and don't want to just follow the crowd. And that newsletter is called The Digital Contrarian, which you can get at thedigitalcontrarian.com. It's totally free. You just need to provide your email address. I'll ask you to confirm your email address because it's my personal email list. And that would be a great place to continue this discussion and this dialogue.
Well, I love that. And I love the name, right? The Digital Contrarian, which is how do you take a lifetime of lessons learned and then condense it down into information. I love your ability to see patterns. And I know that that information comes out in your newsletter. So it's a great place for those people that are building a business or simply involved in digital, you know, social
Mhm.
media and posting, right? Whether you're building a business or not, it's a great read. Well, thank you so much for being here. We will do our best to put links somewhere, wherever you're consuming this podcast, we'll do our best to include a link to be able to sign up for Ryan's newsletter. And if you're, whatever platform you're watching us, please subscribe to the Business Bridge to Podcast. I can't even say Business Bridge to Breakthrough podcast, because you'll find more insight like this. Thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate it. And we'll chat soon.
Thank you, Debbie. It's been an
Thank you.
absolute honor.